Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to our Thursday Nishcast, coming at you on the 9th of November. We're from theniche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. On our website at the moment, we do have, I did a Kiwi NRL youngster Big Bopper wrap, which is all about the young forwards from Aotearoa who I reckon are on the way up. The Sharks, they got Salisi Ata, Felix Fa'atili. I did see that the Eels had signed Javan Stevenson Hulla from the Roosters. He's from the Manawatu region. He's a big bopper for there. You've got Felix Fa'atili. No, Felix's older brother, Caius Fa'atili, who I still think is in the Broncos system. He's climbing up those ranks, let alone the biggest bopper of them all, Isaac Matalavea Booth, who was signed to the Bulldogs. You can read about, I think I had 9 big boppers from Aotearoa signed to NRL clubs rising through those systems. So you can read about them on our website, theniche-case.com. You can also check in with the National League roundups for, what is it, week 7?
Week 7, that's the one. 2 more to go.
And
plus grand finals.
We will be chatting National League football coming up. A couple of big games. I did see that. I did scout out some National League football. You have, let me just pull it up here. We have Auckland City versus Wellington Olympic in the men. That's a top of the table clash. Auckland City undefeated, Wellington Olympic 5-2. And we also have one of the Auckland derbies, Auckland United versus Western Springs. Western Springs are second, Auckland United are third. So we will be chatting through those today, and you can also read about them on our website, theniche-case.com. And for our generous supporters on Patreon, and those with a paid Substack subscription, we will be dropping our subscriber podcast tomorrow on Friday, because the Blackcaps play tonight. They face Sri Lanka in basically a must-win World Cup encounter. And we've also got Plunket Shield cricket winding down today, day 4. We've got Auckland versus Canterbury in Canterbury. We've got Central Districts versus Otago. That game is in Otago. And we've also got Wellington versus Northern Districts. Couple of highlights from the first 3 days. Nathan Smith, 5 wickets, and he's taken at least 3 wickets in every single innings bowled this season in the Plunket Shield. Christian Clark, 6 wickets for Northern Districts. Second time he's taken 6 wickets this season. Both of them, young seamers from Aotearoa. That's what is happening in the Plunket Shield, and I'll be doing a deep dive for our website probably Saturday morning. We'll do Plunket Shield round 3 recap. Otherwise, we will be chatting through Blackcaps and Plunket Shield cricket in our subscriber podcast tomorrow, Friday. So check that out and keep an eye on that for the Substack feed as well as the Patreon. And you can support us straight up the guts via Patreon, patreon.com/our niche case, or you can upgrade your Substack subscription to a paid subscription and access that subscriber podcast. They're just 2 easy ways to support the niche case straight up the guts. And we also send out our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack, chocker, full of Aotearoa sporting information. So check that out, thenichecase.substack.com. The Monday and Friday newsletters are completely free. And then we do offer our subscriber podcast for those supporting the Niche Case. Before we crack on to Aotearoa sporting matters, let's get a dose of mindfulness.
Yeah, let's do that. This is from Werner Herzog, German film director, the legend himself. I wish I could do the impersonation of his accent, but I'm not going to bother with that one. But he said, "The world reveals itself to those who travel on foot." And I liked that, so I wrote it down and I used it for the podcast.
I do love a good walk, more of a walker than a runner. So shout out to traveling on foot. Everything's a bit slower when you're walking. You can see more, you observe more, you're aware of more. and you maybe learn more.
And you're actually there, like wherever you are. If it's a matter of traveling, or if it's just a matter of just like going for a walk or something, or going for a run, because I wasn't thinking of it in that context, but since you mentioned that, I think that applies too. Um, you're actually there in the environment, like reach out and touch stuff and involved in what's going on, as opposed to even just like just drive into the dairy down the road for 30 seconds as when you could have made a 5 minute walk or something like that. You're not, I mean, maybe you don't, in that situation, maybe you don't need to be involved in what's going on around you, but you're not if you're just driving there, get out of the car, back in. Like you're confined at every point of that at every point of that journey. But especially when you go thinking about like traveling around the place, it's like a road trip's good. Like I love a good road trip, but also you do need to stop now and then and like admire stuff and get out of the car and stretch your legs. And if you want to feel like you've experienced the terrain you've gone through, otherwise you might as well just teleport, right? And that's multiplied when you start thinking about like air travel and like long distance stuff. You gotta, if you don't always need to be involved in these things, but if you want to get the full experience here, you got to, I was going to say you got to get your shoes off, but well, maybe you do need to get your shoes off. You probably want to put your shoes on depending on where you're walking, but other times it's green grass. Get your toes out there and get amongst it. Why not?
Yeah, if you're in the CBD, you probably want to have some shoes on because you never know
Yeah.
what's on the turf. And motion is lotion. So if you're out there walking, you got the body in motion, you got everything wiggling around because your body just sorts itself out. There's a reason why we walk, and part of that is to fix everything inside of us because that motion is lotion. Kia kaha. You are in the midst of planning a little deep dive into the Aotearoa Breakers, so I do want to touch base here about the Breakers. They face Perth on Friday night. That game is over in Perth. What is the gist of your New Zealand Breaker observations to start this season?
Well, I didn't realize they're playing Perth first of all, because that's even better because you got two teams that are in quite a similar situation there. Unfortunately, the two teams with the most New Zealanders involved, but also Perth have had to fight back the idea that they might sack their coach, and they've had some troubles with results and just things not clicking the way they ought to. But so have the Breakers. So that's an interesting game between a couple of teams who are like the powerhouse teams of the last 10, 15 years in this competition. There was a period there where there wasn't a final series for like 6, 7, 8 years or something that didn't involve at least one of these two teams. I think in the more recent years that swung back towards Melbourne and Sydney, but it was New Zealand versus Perth for a long while there. And that'll be a funky game to see which team, because whichever team wins is gonna feel like they've taken big steps towards fixing things. Whichever team doesn't is going to feel like the world's still caving in on them. For the Breakers, the gist of the article is a relatively simple one, right? We've seen that they're second to last on the table. They're not winning very many games. I think both their wins have actually been against Cairns so far. They were under strength Cairns in both occasions where they were missing an import or two. So there might be a little bit of you win you just play the game that's in front of you, but they haven't been able to beat anyone else yet is a bit of an issue. And so the idea is like, well, this team was terrible for like 3 or 4 years. Then all of a sudden last season they were amazing, and they went all the way to not just to the grand final, but they took it to a deciding match in the grand final. And it's not like they got blown out there. They ran out of steam in the end, but they were very competitive throughout that whole thing. They were this clear second best team in the season, and it's only a great Sydney side that were able to top them in the end. And now it seems like they've kind of gone back to what they were doing before that, and there was such a clear recipe for how they got good last season. It was built upon great defense. It was built upon really clever recruitment, in particular their imports, who just every one of those guys fit a really distinct and an ideal role for the team. And they amplified their sort of their Kiwi player crew certainly, but also just the Kiwi value kind of aspect of the club as well, and trying to get that represented in their imports and their Australian guys as well, and everything just seemed to like around the cult of personality around Modi Mayor as well. Everything just seemed to click suddenly, like all of a sudden. It was such an incredible turnaround in almost like an instant. Now they've reverted, and in reverting it just feels like they're doing the things that they did before last season again, like the things that you thought they'd worked through. Like, okay, they've realized we did this and it didn't work, we did this and it did work, let's try keep that formula. It seems like they've gone away from that, and you're seeing them signing imports based on just who's the most talented player available rather than who fits this team specifically. A good example of that would be like Zylan Cheatham and Finn Delaney are both having to play centre minutes this season, and Cheatham's currently out injured, and both of them should be starters for the Breakers. Both of them also are power forward specialists, which means that you kind of can't start them unless one's out of position. Or it's like these were both new signings, and you've put starting level players in the same spot. Like it's just that doesn't quite add up. Their defense is the second worst in the competition right now through the first few weeks. They did that thing again where they're like, yeah, let's just go to the NBA in the middle of our season and play a couple games against not even good NBA teams, the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trailblazers, like rebuilding teams, and got thrashed by thrashed by Portland, and then they were okay against Utah, or it might be the other way around, but they lost both those games. It's not like they were giving their bench players many minutes. And those ones, like it's the young sort of Kiwi development players weren't getting opportunities. I just don't, and they're the only ones who it seems like would get something out of that, because most of the other guys, the Americans have all played summer league. Most of the New Zealanders and Australians have played summer league. Some of them have played G League. Like this, playing against NBA players or World Cups, let alone like playing against NBA players is nothing special for them, particularly in preseason mode where it's not even the best of those teams. Like Damian Lillard got traded away from the Trailblazers like a week before they got there. That just didn't make sense, and you're doing that 2 weeks into your new season, which means you got a bunch of delays, which means you come back and you're tired, you're exhausted, you're fatigued from that, with all the travel unnecessarily during the middle of your start of your season, and then you got to play a bunch of double headers on top of that to make up for the games you missed. They're losing, they're conceding a lot of points. Offensively, they're all right, but they've suddenly got injuries again, which has been a factor, which was something that hit them a lot in the previous years. I don't know. It just seems like it almost feels like a bit of a betrayal of trust, right? It's like we got to this point where the Breakers are just this disappointing team because they're just running things like an American show and nothing was quite working. Then they figure things out, come back around, and I've wrote multiple things last season about how good it was and what a great transformation it was, and then they go back to the old way of doing things. It's like, well, I guess maybe I just gave them a bit too much credit. I don't know, but that's where we're at with the Breakers. They might turn it around. They're a little bit better in the last couple of weeks, so I wouldn't rule it out. Certainly that they swing things back in with a few wins, figure out the right combinations, and then go from there. But the start of the season has been a little bit of a shocker for a team that was coming off a grand final and is now trying to fend off last place as things stand.
It is convenient how they were super American and they sucked. They went super Kiwi identity, they were good. Now they've gone back to super American and they suck. Like the stars seem to align, the dots seem to connect, and it all seems to make sense as to, especially Kiwi sports teams. We've talked about the Aotearoa Kiwis, we've talked about the Blackcaps. All these teams, they really tap into. Even the New Zealand Warriors, what happened when they
Warriors and Phoenix, I'd suggest.
They're both going all in on Aotearoa flavour and their community and their local development and players from the area and all that stuff. Like these teams succeed when they embrace the Kiwi identity, and the Breakers, they've also done that because they were good when they embraced the Kiwi identity, but they also don't want to do that. And that's why they suck. Let's drop a quick little bit here about the Blackcaps Test squad. The Blackcaps do face Sri Lanka tonight in the World Cup, but soon after the World Cup ends, they will go to Bangladesh for a 2-test series, I believe. And this is the start of the World Test Championship cycle. The
Ooh.
Black Caps are yet to play a game in this cycle, as have Bangladesh. And the squad, it does highlight Aotearoa's depth of talent, because like the amount of spinners you can select from. Ish Sodhi, Mitchell Santner, Ajaz Patel, Rachin Ravindra, and Glenn Phillips are all in the squad as spin bowling options. Kane Williamson, he's averaging 94 this season. He's had 10 innings, 4 centuries, 6 test matches, 4 centuries for Kane Williamson. He's pretty good at batting. There are... Otherwise, it's pretty stock standard test squad for the Black Caps. Kyle Jamieson has come back in, so the seamers are Jamieson, Southey, Matt Henry, hopefully healing up from his hamstring issue. Ajaz Patel and Henry Nicholls are the only players selected who aren't in the World Cup extended group. Ajaz Patel is playing Plunket Shield for CD. Henry Nicholls is playing Plunket Shield for Canterbury. And I believe Henry Nicholls has 2 centuries and a 60. So he's batted 3 times and he's gone over 50 in all 3 innings. I find the Black Caps test context a bit more interesting than the players selected because they've won 3 tests in a row. That seems pretty good. And everyone was having a whinge and a moan about Black Caps test cricket last summer, a summer in which they won 3 out of 4 tests. And we've seen how productive the Black Caps pipeline is with players like Rachin Ravindra shining at this World Cup, let alone the players who are performing in Plunket Shield right now. There's a lot of young cricketers shining in the Plunket Shield at the moment. And another little wrinkle here is that the Black Caps were really good in 2 drawn test matches against Pakistan in Pakistan this time last year, or a bit later on last year. So Bangladesh, and so the Black Caps toured Pakistan, 2 drawn test matches, which is really hard to do in subcontinent conditions for the Black Caps. Like, they don't necessarily get positive results in those test series too often. So when I write about this, I'm going to be kind of drawn back to that Pakistan series, that Pakistan tour, to learn about what happened there, or to recapture what happened there and preview the Bangladesh stuff. And I did hear another thing that I just want to put out there. For all the hoopla about England test cricket under Brendan McCullum, apparently they haven't won a test series this year. So,
well, they didn't beat us.
Not in New Zealand. They, of course, a year ago, 2022, they did win 3 tests in a row against the Black Caps. But if you're thinking about the state of test cricket, just keep in mind that England haven't won a test series this year, apparently, under Brendan McCullum, and the Black Caps have won 3 tests in a row. Yes, they did lose to England in Tauranga last year. They also bounced back for a victory. Then they had another victory over Sri Lanka and another victory over Sri Lanka. And now they're off to Bangladesh. But I also want to highlight that Pakistan Test Series as a real positive tour for the Black Caps.
Yeah, and from memory, one of those Pakistan games ended with like under lights where they probably would have won if they'd been able to see things through, but they ran out of time. I think that was that tour anyway. Hero of the series saving win against England was Neil Wagner. I noticed Neil Wagner isn't here. Do you know why that is? Have they said anything about that?
He's not playing for Northern Districts, and I think he might have only played the first game of Plunket Shield. So he hasn't been playing for Northern, and to be honest, he hasn't been like in fantastic form for Northern Districts in the Plunket Shield over the last 2 summers. Nor is Bangladesh a place where you want to take Neil Wagner. Like he's
often the guy now who misses out on flat pitches. So
and they don't have a lefty for the series, but they do have Jamieson as a bit of X factor, Matt Henry, Tim Southey. But most importantly, you've got a strong variety of spinners and really good spinners as well.
One other thing from that squad, not so much from the squad itself as the announcement. Let me get this back up here because I do notice it's the first I think the first squad picked with new Blackcap selector Sam Wells is in charge instead of Gavin Larson. I think Larson was still there for the World Cup squad. I'm not sure, but anyway, this is certainly the first sort of post World Cup. There's a bit of the changing of the guards kind of moment. Um, and I wondered what that would mean for the Trent Bolt situation, right? Because there was a bit of a not quite a hardline stance, but it was closer to a hardline stance with not wanting to pick Bolt for most series on account of his lack of a central contract. I did notice at the very end of that thing, there was a sentence that says Trent Bolt was not considered for selection after making himself unavailable for the tour. That says making himself unavailable for the tour rather than them making him unavailable for the tour for the lack of a thing. I don't know there's really anything we can say on that because we got to see what further squads suggest and whatever. But it is a point to at least take note of is that wording there and wondering perhaps is there like I don't know because otherwise there's a distinct possibility that if the Black Caps lose tonight against Sri Lanka, that will be the last time Trent Bolt plays for the Black Caps. Like that is not out of the question with the way that's gone. That could happen. Ideally, that'll be a World Cup final. that if that has to be the case, then it'll be a World Cup final. He says goodbye. And but even more ideally than that would be that he does continue to pop up now and then when he's around. He's certainly good enough. Absolutely no doubt about that. It's one to keep an eye on because I just wonder if that wording of that press release there maybe suggested that the door isn't entirely closed post World Cup.
The first thing that comes to mind when you mention that is Sam Wells is a former player. Obviously, Gavin Larson's a former player as well, but Sam Wells...
But Wells a much more recent former player.
Precisely, and I think Sam Wells would be more pro-player in these situations, especially given the nature of the global cricketing landscape at the moment. I think, if anything, he might be more favourable to Trent Bolt's situation and what's happening there. But also, like, why there's not really a need for Trent Bolt to tour Bangladesh.
Particularly straight after a World Cup where he's going to have played every game and bowled 10 overs in most of them.
As like the reason Trent Bolt doesn't have a contract, well, part of it is because he does want to spend more time with his whānau at home. So taking a seamer to Bangladesh straight after the World Cup does seem a bit unnecessary, especially considering the strength of this Black Caps bowling attack. Like, I don't think they are desperate for Trent Bolt. I think this World Cup team might be desperate for Trent Bolt, although, as I've got the Cricinfo announcement in front of me here, I've also got a Cricinfo headline here saying Trent Bolt, a World Cup great who isn't having a great World Cup. But you do want Trent Bolt playing in big World Cup games, especially in India, given the success he has had there as an IPL player and with the Black Caps. I wouldn't be surprised if Trent Bolt's playing in the home summer. Especially, I think they've got a test series against Australia. So I'm curious to see how the Black Caps, I need to find the right thing here with the next games for the Black Caps. So the Black Caps face South Africa, which is the series where South Africa have their T20 tournament on at that time. So shout out to them. They'll probably send a weaker team, which will hopefully guarantee us some wins, which will be useful. In the same way that I am happy to see England suck, I'm also happy to see South Africa not send their strongest team to New Zealand for a test series. Like, I don't think it's going to have any impact on crowd numbers because the major wrinkle here with how the test landscape looks, shout out to landscaping, the test vista, let's use a different word, how the test vista looks is the Black Caps have, there's a rarity to test cricket. There is a scarcity to their test cricket, which drums up the crowds. Like, they've only got 4 tests scheduled for this summer in Aotearoa, which means every day of every test needs to be savoured. And so I don't think the strength of South Africa's team is going to have any impact on crowd numbers in New Zealand, because Kiwis want to see the Blackcaps play Test cricket. And I don't know if Trent Boult will be, like, he might want to prepare for the Australian Test series with some Test cricket against South Africa. But if he's not going to play those home tests, I don't think Trent Boult's going to play any other Test cricket, right? Like, he gets to chill out in Aotearoa, play a bit of Test cricket, and have a bit of fun with his friends. If he does want to play Test cricket in that situation, he's not going to want to tour anywhere to play Test cricket or play any Test cricket in the future. So I agree that this might be a slightly different angle for Blackcaps selections, especially with Trent Boult. And once again, you do not need a contract to play for the Blackcaps. You do not need a contract to play domestic cricket. You do not need a contract to play for the White Ferns. They are just mechanisms that New Zealand cricket rightfully uses to measure player salaries. But there is no correlation between your contract and your chances of Test selection. No matter how much they want to say, players with contracts will be favoured. If Trent Boult is willing to commit to a home summer or a Test series, probably it will be a bit iffy if he like picks and chooses which home Test series he plays for. But if Trent Boult's available, he's going to play. And it's not going to be like, nah, Trent Boult, yeah, you don't have a contract, we don't want you. Nah, he's a legend of Kiwi cricket, and the contracts don't actually have any correlation to whether you're available or not.
And I sympathize with their reasoning in the first place of like they don't want players being able to dictate when they're available, and and the whole like the precedent it might set. I still do come down on the side though that Trent Boult is someone who, when you've taken like 300 Test wickets, you've maybe earned a little bit more leeway than someone else. So like when Colin Munro effectively did this, well, they dropped him before that. Martin Guptill, you could say the same thing about. So that wasn't necessarily their decisions, but I don't know who's a good example within the current team. I think if Glenn Phillips did that right now, he wouldn't play again, even though he's a first 11 player right now. If Kane Williamson did it, which I don't necessarily think Kane Williamson would, I think he would have enough leeway. Trent Boult has done it. I think he probably deserves a bit of leeway. I think maybe Tim Southee would be in that situation as well, though he's not going to because he's enjoying being Test captain right now. So, And the other thing, when the Bangladesh tour is going to have a lot of spin overs, clearly. The other interesting thing, because we've talked about a little bit about Neil Wagner there and a little bit about Trent Boult, like two seamers who aren't going. The three seamers who are going, Jamieson, Henry, and Southee. Because you mentioned Boult having had a big workload at this World Cup, which is very true. And we're seeing there's a lot of injuries at this World Cup, even beyond the Blackcaps. It's just to think that the conditions are quite grueling. There's a lot of heat and humidity. This is like... Even Glenn Maxwell couldn't bat for 30 overs the other day without cramping up or whatever. Or maybe that was delayed concussion things from falling off his golf cart. I don't know. He should fall off his golf cart more often because that worked for him. Tim Southee's played like 2 games, I think, at this World Cup and is coming off an injury, admittedly. Carl Jamieson hasn't yet played at this World Cup and is working his way back to fitness from a longer-term injury. Matt Henry played a bunch at the start and then got injured. So you do have 3 bowlers there, 3 seam bowlers who have injury question marks about them during this year, if not during this exact moment. But also you have 3 bowlers there who haven't had a big workload leading up to this tour, whereas Trent Boult has throughout the World Cup. And yeah, the bulk of their overs are going to get through with the other fellas anyway. So I expect that will be interesting how that works, because I think Ravindra is probably going to be playing now, which means he'll be bowling a lot of overs. Ajaz Patel was out of the team for a little bit and now he's back in. He seems to play the overseas tours, so I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back in. But Ish Sodhi had kind of nudged his way up in that Pakistan series. And I think Mitchell Santner is probably a decent chance to play as well. So I don't know how they're going to balance that, because I don't necessarily think Phillips will make the cut, but then also you might think, well, he's actually the only. We've just talked about two left arm orthodoxes and a leg spinner. So Phillips is the only one who, in as much as he turns the ball, which isn't a lot, but he does turn it a little bit, turns the ball the other way, which the other fellas don't do. So there's another consideration there. So how they build up their bowling lineup will be quite a funky one. I wouldn't be surprised if, because they've only got three guys in a 15-man squad, three seamers. I wouldn't be surprised if they're just going to go on with only two seamers and say if we need more seam overs, Daryl Mitchell is around. But yeah, it's nice to know that there's cricket beyond the World Cup, because it takes away the jeopardy of, like, if they bugger this up against Sri Lanka, who knows what happens. Well, at least just cruise on into a test summer, starting with some games in Bangladesh, some hopefully winnable home ones against South Africa, and then dirty old Aussies later on. There's a good array of test cricket following up to appease the soul if things go awry against Sri Lanka at the ODI stuff.
You said the bowling. I'm fascinated by the batting, because Kane Williamson's amazing. Tom Latham is averaging, well, hold that thought, but you've got Kane Williamson, Tom Latham, Devon Conway, Daryl Mitchell. I can't see a spot for Henry Nicholls in the test lineup, given how fantastic these batters are, and then the balance with like someone like Ravindra offering his all-round ability. But I got a bit of trivia. 3 Blackcaps batters are averaging over 50 in Test cricket this year. Who are they? One's obvious.
Daryl Mitchell, Kane Williamson, and when was that? Tom Blundell?
You got 2. Williamson and Blundell are averaging over 50.
Not Mitchell. Damn.
Not Mitchell. Tom Latham, he's 52. Daryl Mitchell, 46.
We got a big 100 against Sri Lanka, didn't we?
Mitchell's averaging 46.8. Devon Conway's averaging 48.5. So they're close enough.
It's close, yeah.
Second one, which Blackcaps bowler has the lowest test bowling average this year? All bowlers. No minimums, just all bowlers.
Matt Henry.
No.
Tim Southee.
No. Although they are averaging under 30, which is pretty significant there, because only 3 bowlers averaging under 30 in Test cricket this year. One of them's Tim Southee. He's got the most wickets, 23 wickets. One of them's Matt Henry, tied with Michael Bracewell for the second most wickets, 19 wickets. Who's the other bowler averaging below 30, but with the lowest test average this year in bowling?
Forgot about old mate. Michael Bracewell. There was a note in the thing about how he's still recovering, rehabbing his torn Achilles. So I don't love him as a test player, even in these conditions, whereas off spin would be nice, but we've missed him massively at the World Cup. Ish Sodhi? No, that was the Pakistan. Is it him?
Ish Sodhi.
I thought the Pakistan stuff was last December.
Ish Sodhi.
Must have been wrong.
Oh no, sorry. It's since the 1st of December 2022, so it does include the Pakistan league.
Okay, yeah. Well, then Ish Sodhi. Yes.
Ish Sodhi is averaging.
So I'm guessing him.
25 with the ball, so he's got the lowest test average basically over almost the year. So that is fun. All Whites football. We've got 2 international squads. We've got an all white squad and we've got an under 17 squad. I did see you put up on Twitter some information about Mali Luluwai, who has signed a deal. Is that with Burnley FC? So he is part of the New Zealand under 17 squad that is playing in the under 17 World Cup. So we've got an under 17 World Cup coming up, and we've also got an all white squad. So is Mali Luluwai like the biggest note in the under 17 World Cup squad?
Yeah, probably. I'm just checking because I think he's probably the captain, but they might not have announced that yet. Ding, 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 ding. No, they didn't say anything in the press release about it. But he did captain them at the qualifying tournament, and then he got injured, so he only played a couple games. But yeah, I expect he'll captain the side. He is the most sort of pedigree player in that squad. Son of Kylie Luluai, who is don't think he played for the Kiwis, but I think he did play for New Zealand Māori or something like that. But he had a long league career in with the Leeds Rhinos, where he's very renowned, and obviously he is the, I think, cousin of Thomas Luluai, and part of the great Luluai whānau. Um, and Marley's a footballer. But having grown up in England, that's how that worked out.
I
He
will. There is a. I think Siamani Luluwai is playing junior footy with the Canberra Raiders. I did see a lot of him
Hey,
this season. I think he was SG Ball and/or Jersey Flegg centre for the Raiders.
the legacy lives on. There is a photo on the Burnley website of his new contract of him with the family, like mum and dad and his two younger brothers. There, it was pretty cool. Particularly because it's an English Premier League club announcing a signing, and here's this big pole. Like he even had the what do you call it, like the lei thing over his over his neck, that keeping the Samoan traditions
That
nice and
was
sturdy.
the, what did they call it? I'm just
It begins with you. I
what
should
was
know
it?
because I just looked at it, but
Uh, However, he descends from Samoan heritage, and it's his Samoan family who sent over his ulafala, a traditional
Ulafale.
Samoan necklace which he proudly wore during his signing shots.
Yeah, beautiful. So, like, the story with Luluai, right, is that he was at the Manchester City Academy, and he got to the age of 16 there. He got to the age of 16, where that's the year before professional contracts come in. And the way Manchester City do it, because they've got a pretty big academy, as you might guess, they give out like pre-contracts to the 16-year-old. So you reach that age grade, and if you're good enough, you get like this sort of pre-professional contract for the last year, and then you try with that, you just sort of like just bottlenecking it into a like, these are the guys who have a chance of making it pro, and then the best of them will get pro deals. So he missed the cut, having been at City Academy since he was like 10 or something, probably younger. He missed the cut at age 16. So he went around looking at, I think he looked at Rangers for a little bit. He looked at Stoke for a little bit, where he actually played a game as a trialist for Stoke alongside Adam Watson, who's also in this New Zealand under 17 squad. He might have even hooked it up for him. I don't know. But after peeking at Rangers and Stoke, where I think there are some Man City connections between those. Like, I think that club probably helped him with his next opportunities of being like, well, these are some clubs where quite a few of our players have gone before, because where he ended up was Burnley, which is not very far away from Manchester at all. And who is the manager of Burnley's first team right now is Vincent Kompany, Manchester City legend. So a number of players from City who have missed the cut have gone to Burnley as sort of the next step. He's one of them. 16 years old, started this current season. So like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, something like that. He signs a 2-year scholarship deal with Burnley. 5 months later, he turns 17 on his 17th birthday. So the first day that he's eligible for a professional contract, they give him a deal that lasts until 2026. So not even 6 months into, not even a quarter of the way through the scholarship deal that he signed, he's already signed a long-term professional deal. That tells you that they rate him pretty highly. Since he's gone there, he's become a regular for their under 18s team, where they've turned him from a centre back into a centre midfielder, sort of a defensive midfielder, where he's, I noticed, listed as a defensive midfielder on the New Zealand football announcement. Did play centre back in qualifying at the very start of the year. Regular for their under 18s. He's also already played, I think, a couple of games, including at least one competitive game for their under 21s, while he was 16 years old. So 5 years under the age grade. They did that a little, like, he's not the only one. There was sort of a thing where, like, it's something they do now and then to kind of show the younger ones the next step is to give the best of them some match day experience, but with the grade above that. But like, he's one of the guys who's getting that opportunity, having only just signed with the club. So now on the first day he's eligible for a pro deal. They've given him a 3-year contract. that pretty much solidifies him as one of the absolute best prospects coming through, and we should see a lot of that at the Under-17 World Cup, where there are a few interesting, few very good players in that Under-17 squad. Probably a little bit more developed than you'd normally expect, partly because of the Phoenix having a bit more clarity about their academy. You've seen a few like Gabriel Sloan Rodriguez is a guy that they love at the Knicks and who's played a few National League games. Skillful winger, he'll take guys on. Pretty pumped to see what he looks like against guys his own age, because I think that's you might see a bit more of that athleticism from him there shining through. Luke Supik is from the Wellington Phoenix. He's got a full contract already. Like, he's on a senior contract at the Knicks. Hasn't had the opportunity to play yet because he was injured the first 2 weeks, and then now he's gone off with the Under-17. So we haven't seen him in a squad yet for the first team, but he will make an A-League debut before this season is through. He's a goal-scoring striker, probably the best goal-scoring striker they've had since Ben Waine was coming through the academy. So, plenty of raps on that fella. Matt Ford is, I would imagine, going to be the goalkeeper. He's from Kashmir Tech, and he is going to the Under-17 World Cup, and he's been starting every game in goal for Kashmir Technical in the National League and looking good, like completely good. Like, I'm assuming he's 16, he's 17 at the oldest, and he's just looked like a comfortable presence between the sticks for Kashmir Tech at National League level. So he's pretty handy. Anirudh Cassidy from the Wellington Phoenix is another midfielder who's a good passer. The Phoenix are pretty good at bringing through technical midfielders. I think academies in general are quite good at that. That's the kind of skill set that shines through at academy football. Anirudh Cassidy is definitely part of that. I mentioned Adam Watson. There's quite often Under-17 World Cups is where you first get to hear about some of these guys, but there are actually a couple guys in this squad who are already fairly established. They have a tough draw. I think they play Venezuela at 10 p.m. on Sunday night, and then Mexico is also in their group, and Germany is also in their group. So I don't think they'll make it through the group stage, but it's a good opportunity to see some of our best players coming through, because a few of them, it feels like this Under-17 squad is a little bit more advanced than they usually are at this age grade.
I do see Anton Isako is there as well, perhaps a relation to Jermaine.
He
Isako?
is based at Sydney FC. Anton Isako was part of qualifying as well. So he's, I think mostly raised in Australia. So I don't know if there's. I did wonder that myself, if there's some kind of connection, but nothing that I've been able to find yet.
That would be crazy. The Under-17 football team has two
Rugby league names. Yeah.
At a time where everything you were just explaining, like these kids and all the youngsters in Aotearoa sport are phenomenal. That is the major theme of basically Aotearoa sport at the moment. And I was thinking, like, these, like you're saying, all these dudes like under-16, they're playing, National League football, they're playing upper grade, they're turning 17 and straight away getting a pro contract. So literally everything I've been working through with Kiwi NRL players who are like SG Ball, they're playing Jersey Flag, they're I think Elijah Rasmussen from Westlake Boys High School, also born in England, so there's a little funky little Mali Luluai connection there, but he was Mal Meninga Cup, which was under 18s, and he spent one game as 18th man for Redcliffe in Queensland Cup. So he's under 18s, and he's, on the fringe of their reserve grade team. So it's all similar themes there. Are you going to be going deep into this covering this World Cup campaign?
We'll see how it goes. I'll definitely mention it in the email at some point, and I expect I'll write a sort of roundup after the group stage is done, which I imagine is their tournament done. But I'll be watching the games. I'll be keeping a close eye.
The All Whites also have two games locked in. They're touring Greece and Ireland. So they're playing against Greece on the 17th, and they're playing against the Republic of Ireland in Dublin on the 21st. This squad features a bunch of A-League players, which is, I think it's good, but it shows the strength of Aotearoa football, where the All Whites can have a really competitive, high-quality squad without any players from the A-League, as we saw in the last window. So A-League players coming in, Alex Paulson, Tim Payne, and Finn Sermon from the Phoenix. We've also got Clayton Lewis from MacArthur FC. Like
And that's it, I think.
all these football squads are amazing. Like just the talent and the quality of players in every single New Zealand squad is pretty enticing. Is it the return of the A-League players or anything else that perks your antenna up about this squad ahead of these games?
I think it's the
maybe Joe Bell?
partial return of the A-League players. Joe Bell is back as well. That's definitely important. Let's get a bit of the Joe Bell and Marko Stamanic combination, I think, is going to make a difference for this side. Yeah, Greece and Ireland are sort of, they're higher ranked teams, but they're not kind of the types of nations that make World Cups every time or expect to qualify for World Cups, like, you know, Australia or Sweden or a couple of the teams they've played recently. They're sort of the kind of teams who are better than the All Whites, but they might be able to scrape a result. But more importantly, they're about at the standard where we can realistically hope to get to if this kind of team fulfills its potential. And that's the kind of games you want. You want to see what the level is that you're aspiring towards, and then see if you can achieve it by scoring some goals and getting a cheeky win or a couple draws or whatever it takes against these kind of sides. But unlike the last tour where they played Congo, got a draw, played Australia, outclassed in that one. Those two games were at neutral venues, whereas these two are going to be I think, in Athens and in Dublin. So that makes a difference too. It's very much going to be the away team rather than being played at relatively low atmosphere, small crowd, kind of neutral venues. But because there's a few things. There's also the fact they've picked Singh and Wood when both are currently out injured, which is risky because I'd imagine you leave those two. I mean, you do it because it's the same reason the Blackcaps picked Tim Southee and Kane Williamson when they were injured. Like, lesser players don't get that luxury, except in New Zealand football. They always pick injured players for football ferns and all white squads. So maybe that's different with them. But
you also just want them around, bring the boys in.
You do. And that's why they would have had Williamson there, even if he wasn't fit and available. And I think if Chris Wood can be there, you probably do want him around. But they're also the two most important players. I mean, like, to some extent, Bell and Stamanic, we saw it last time, right? Like, if one's missing, at least the other one is still there. There's no one else who can do what Chris Wood does, and there's no one else who can do what Sarpreet Singh does. So if any two players are going to be given that sort of long run rate, it's those two. And it does sound like, Chris Wood's manager said that he expects him back after the international break. So if he's going to be back after the international break, maybe he'll be back during the international break as well, or at least for some time off the bench or something. And 30 minutes of Chris Wood is better than none. So those are the two players you're going to give that kind of leeway to. But it is risky because if they don't recover in time and you can't play them, you have to, by like that course of logic, to see that through, you have to give them as long as possible to recover, which means that if they don't recover, you're just two players short in your squad. Like, there's no time to replace them. But at least they might not have guys who can do what those guys do, but they do have other guys who can play those positions, at least, albeit in a different way. So that's another aspect of the squad. But I think the main one, and it is exemplified by the A-League stuff, like, A-League players are available again, sweet as, but only what was the count? Was it 4 or 5?
4.
I had the thing here. 4 A-League players. So only 4 A-League players get it. Yeah, and 2 of those Phoenix players are uncapped. It's Finn Sermon and Alex Paulson. What have Finn Sermon and Alex Paulson done throughout the first 3 weeks of the season? They've been brilliant. What has Tim Payne been like through the first 3 weeks of the season? He's been brilliant. What has Clayton Lewis done? Well, I haven't watched MacArthur as much, but I know he set up a goal on debut and he's been starting for them. Who are the A-League players who aren't there? Like Storm Roux playing for Central Coast. Well, Central Coast haven't been very good the first couple of weeks. Ollie Sale playing for Perth. Guess what happened to Ollie Sale in week 3 after his blunder against the Knicks in week 2? He got dropped. So he was sitting on the bench. He's not going to get picked if he's not playing, right? The guys who, let alone guys who might be, I don't know what Michael Rojas is doing, but he doesn't have a club at the moment, but Costa Barbarouses, some of those other Knicks guys who aren't getting as big minutes, the A-League players who have been called up are not there to make up the numbers. They're the A-League guys who are demanding selection. Even the two who haven't been capped, amongst the most informed Kiwi players in the A-League. That's now the level you have to be at to get selected from the A-League, which is what it should be, because that's not a good enough league to be picking your like what would you call them? Like just stock players out of that. Like there are guys in Europe who can at a higher level who can do a job as these kind of stock players. It's the A League guys to get selected from there. Yeah, and you can get selected, of course, but you got to be knocking the door down, as those ones have done. And the same applies to all these leagues overseas, because what we've seen from last game to that, like Alex Paulson comes in, he's playing really well. He overtakes Ollie Sale in the depth chart, but Ollie Sale wasn't in the last squad either. Nick Sanev was in the last squad. What has Nick Sanev done since then? Not much. He's the backup goalkeeper at AFC Wimbledon. He hasn't been playing much. Therefore, Alex Paulson has been playing. He's been in great form. He overtakes him. Bill Tuiloma is probably the biggest absence from the squad of the guys who could have been there. Tuiloma probably seen more as a right back because of their lack of right back options, but Tim Payne's back now, so that changes that a little bit, although they also dropped Nico Cohen. Bill Tuiloma has not played an MLS game since July when he got injured. And then when he came back from injury, he did play for the All Whites, but he hasn't played for his club team. He's just an unused sub in their last 6 games in a row of the season. They weren't really using him. I got big issues with how they used him even when he was playing at Charlotte FC. And I noticed that they've sacked their coach this morning. So that's hopefully a good thing for Tuiloma, who remains under contract there. But point being, you're not playing, you're not going to be showing any kind of performances to compete. And some of these guys who aren't getting minutes at club level, like Sanev, like Tuiloma, haven't made the squad. And this is what we've been building up towards. This is what we've been trying to reach. I think this is something that the football ferns are still a step or two away, but I don't know, because the A-League is a stronger level in the women's competition worldwide. So, and the bulk of Kiwi players doing stuff in the A-League, particularly ones who weren't even involved in the World Cup, I think that I'm pretty curious about how I'm trying to figure out how to write about this or what I should do. It might be an email segment or something about just some of the players who have emerged who weren't in that World Cup squad who are now competing. Like Michaela Moore might be in the best form of her career right now, having missed the cut for the World Cup. Hannah Blake and Macy Fraser and some of these players doing stuff in the A-League level. There's more depth than they've had in the past. And the All Whites, as I keep saying throughout, like the same journey from these two teams, but the All Whites are just a couple years ahead. They hit the reset button slightly earlier. The All Whites are now in a stage where the guys who aren't playing at club level, someone else is there to take their place. Like you have to be, you're not getting picked on reputation or whatever. Otherwise, Costa Barbarouses would be getting the fun game against his ancestral homeland of Greece. But unfortunately, he is not, because last season he wasn't that good for the Phoenix. He's been better this year. He's been quite good, but it's not enough to overtake a bunch of guys who've been scoring goals in Europe recently. So I don't know. This is the state we've been waiting for the All Whites to get to for so long. And I think this is maybe the first opportunity we can really say it. Like, there's from 1 through 23, players have all had to earn their spot. Sometimes it's with some of it is picking, like, I think Joey Champness is a good example of someone who's been selected less because of demanding club form, but more just decent enough club form and having a profile that's different to other players, like just being the step over king, the current step over belt holder in the All White squad. Someone's got to be able to do it, right? So you pick that guy maybe a bit more for profile, but overall, it's a case of we're seeing, like, Tuiloma is a senior player in this squad, and it is not an experienced squad that can easily handle losing experienced players. But if you're not playing games, if you're not putting your hand up, you're not getting selected because someone else. Well, because someone else is. We're finally there with the All Whites. It's a beautiful new era we've stepped into here.
Who is the hottest player in the squad? Like, who has the best form coming into into this duo of fixtures from the Flying Kiwis realms?
Let me find the squad and check. I think that goalie Max Crocombe would be a candidate there. Although, I mean, the Phoenix trio is it's at a lower level, so it's not quite the same as doing it in the Premier League or anything like that. So, Chris Wood did score a double in his most recent Premier League game. He then immediately got injured, but he did do that. Let me look through some of these. Yeah, Crocombe would be up there. Michael Boxall had a strong season, but his team wasn't so good in the MLS. So I don't know. There's a little bit of a case for Tyler Blinden. I think I might not just. I might go with the old dynamic duo of Callum McCowd and Eli Just there. I think both have scored goals within the last week. Both have been playing quite regularly. Both have been stepping things up for their clubs in Denmark, just in the second division, but he was first division last year and they got relegated. McCowd is with the first div team and starting most games for a side that's actually doing a lot better. They were sort of expected to be one of the more relegation threatened teams. They actually were leading the league for a little while there, and I think they've dropped back to fourth with a loss on the weekend. But he's been a pretty big player for them. I would say if you're talking about form, like immediate form over the last, I don't know, month or two, I think McCowd and Just probably have the strongest cases. It was going to be Marko Stamenic, but then he got dropped. So they didn't actually play their most recent Champions League game. They keep winning games, but they're winning games really ugly at Red Stars. So they've just rotated through, like, your turn to be dropped. Let's try find another thing. So he's currently the guy who's on the bench. Had started every game up until the last two. But he was an unused sub for the last two games in a row, one domestic and one Champions League. But that'll swing back around for him in due course. He's like 21 years old playing Champions League, so I don't think we have to worry about that. He's actually the same age as Alex Paulson, I'm pretty sure, who's only just now getting his first team breakthroughs. So,
You did mention the Wellington Phoenix and their trio of players in form. I imagine those players are going to be playing this weekend against the Melbourne Victory before going away to the All Whites.
Yeah, games are next weekend, so yeah, all the dudes will be having their will be with their clubs for this upcoming weekend, and probably good for the Phoenix guys that are traveling that it is a Friday night game and give them a little bit more, wiggle room in between, get to camp nice and early. But yeah, that'll all the dudes will be getting their games in at club level this weekend.
Let's just check with the Melbourne Victory at. They are second on the ladder, also with a 2 wins and 1 draw, with the same goal difference. So 2 evenly matched teams here. What are you looking for from the Wellington Phoenix ahead of their game against Melbourne Victory in Melbourne tomorrow night?
Well, a win would be cool. It's probably their toughest fixture so far, because it's not, it is away, it's because they were at home last week, and Victory have been playing quite well, and old mate Bruno Fornaroli has been scoring a bundle of goals. I just got to check if he's actually playing, because he did get in a little bit of trouble for for swearing in front of the sideline mark. I don't think he'd be suspended for that, though, but I'm not sure if that's come through. Yeah, escaped sanction, fair enough. So that's a good Melbourne Victory team against a Phoenix team, which, despite their unbeaten start, I mean, I think it's important not to get ahead of ourselves with what they've done so far, because it is a new coach and it is a few new players and it is a new style of play, and this will be their biggest test so far. But that's what you want, right? They've got points on the board so far. So, okay, we step it up. We take on a tougher team. We see how this goes. And Friday night and against Melbourne Victory away is a pretty nice gauge of where this team is at. So I wouldn't be surprised if they lost, but also you want to see how those new kind of how the stuff they've been working on translates against a team that's going to have them under a little bit more pressure. Because so far it's been pretty good. So far they've handled most of what's been thrown at them, and a couple of the teams they've played have been. Brisbane were ahead of them on the table when they played them last week. Not anymore because the Phoenix beat them. Um, but like, can they still like turn that ball over in midfield and then get those quick attacks going off of the back of that? Are they able to withstand um, whatever the victory throws at them? Will Finn Sermon and Scott Wooden keep winning headers all day long like they have been so far? How's Alex Paulson going to go in more difficult situations? All that kind of stuff, with the midfield passing, what's that going to look like? And will Tim Payne be able to get as far forward against a trickier opponent than as he was able to do on the weekend? That kind of stuff. Just see how that translates against a tougher team, because right now the Phoenix are in a place I can't really remember them being in for a very long time. They're always such slow starters to seasons. They hardly ever win multiple games in their first 5 or 6, and they've won 2 out of their first 3 with a draw in the other one. It is their best ever points tally after 3 games of an A-League season. So if they were to lose, as long as they don't get thrashed, it's not like they're doing any damage to themselves. They're still ahead of where anyone expected them to be, but it's it's just a good opportunity to see exactly where they're at after such a good start. Like, let's test things. Let's step up to the next level. Let's go to the next Pokemon gym and see if we can win that badge as well.
You did mention Tim Payne, T-Pain, and his good form, which has earned him a spot in that all-white squad. It feels to me like this is a more of a stylistic improvement or opportunity for T-Pain at right back, with what you're saying on our Monday podcast about how the Wellington Phoenix are playing under Cifi Italiano. Does that give Tim Payne more opportunities to burst forward down the right flank, especially because anytime you push forward within those positions, you do need to have cover. So it's as much about having cover defense as it is putting those players in position. You need to be able to trust that you've got 2 or 3 guys behind you to push up. But also, if Tim Payne does push up that right flank, he's going to get the footy. He's going to be in a good spot. To me, it seems like Tim Payne is making the most of a stylistic element of how the Phoenix are playing under coach Cifi.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, he probably played more as a centre back over the last 2 years than he did as a right back. He was initially a right back for the Phoenix, but then also before that, he was a centre back for Eastern Suburbs. And if you go further back, he was a midfielder and occasional striker for Blackburn Rovers Academy way back when he was 16, 17. He's played in most positions. I don't think I've ever seen him in goalkeeper, but I've seen him in pretty much every other position throughout his career. And he has, it's since he got to A-League level and started playing as a defender that he really locked things down. I don't know if we've seen him as a CDM for the Phoenix, maybe in an Aussie Cup game or 2 at the very start. But yeah, I think last year he had to play a lot of centre back because they needed someone who would be good in the air and strong in the challenge and just another physical presence. But Finn Sermon has come on this year and been really good. And also Callan Elliott has left. Don't know what's up with Callan Elliott. He's another one of those ones in that category of, well, you can't play for the All Whites if you're not playing for a club team. He hasn't actually signed with anyone since he left the Knicks. Some of those, I'd imagine he'd probably want to go overseas, though, and some of those overseas things do get tricky with visas and stuff, so it might be something that just, maybe he's got something in the works and just takes a while to get it announced because you've got to do the paperwork, but we'll see how that goes. And so, yeah, Tim Payne fell into the position of being really the only senior right back who could do that job. Mohamed Al-Tai is also capable of playing a bit of right back and has done so. I think in one of the Aussie Cup games he might have played right back. So it's not an unfamiliar position to him. It's maybe he's not necessarily the first guy you'd think. If you're comparing between him and Callan Elliott, for example, you'd think, well, Callan Elliott's the attacking option and Payne's the defensive option. One's going to be better in one aspect, one's better in the other. But Payne's attacking stuff has been fantastic so far this year, and he's always been a really good technical player. So his crossing is fantastic. Including from dead ball stuff. And the switches of play he used to hit for Eastern Suburbs from centre back, like a centre back picking out the winger on the other side of the field, like that stuff was incredible. You don't get so many opportunities to do that at A-League level, but it's something he's always been capable of. And yeah, like he's not going to burst past his marker. He's not going to throw a step over and dribble past him, but he is going to do the technical stuff very well. Maybe he stops the ball, plays a 1-2, and gets the defender static and beats him that way, or he cuts in and shoots as he did to score his goal, or he just holds his width and curls in a nice ball around the defender. That kind of like it's as much about getting into position as anything because he's got the tools to do what he needs to do when he gets there. And yeah, just exactly what you're saying before. The system is allowing him to do that, and the fact they're playing with two kind of defensive midfielders, Rufa and Altai, one of them can get up and support, and one of them can drop in to cover. They've got the available options to be able to do that kind of thing, and yeah, it's unleashed him in a way where I don't necessarily think it's about Tim Payne becoming such a better player over these weeks as it is about just he knows the role that he's being asked to do and he's doing it. And the role is to get the fullbacks into a position to help influence on the attack, not always overlapping or staying wide either, but sometimes underlapping and doing the inverted thing. I think you see a little bit more of that with Kelly Heald on the other side, maybe because he's just a little bit of a silkier passer. But yeah, I mean, fact is, both of them had assists on the weekend. Like both fullbacks had assists, plus Tim Payne also scored a goal. So you can clearly see that fullback play is an emphasis for what Chiefy's trying to get them to do.
The Wellington Phoenix women, they play their first game, I believe, at Porirua Park, which is still in Wellington, but it's not the big old cake tin. They are facing Western United. Western United are sixth. They've got 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss. The Wellington Phoenix, 2 wins and a loss. What are you looking for here? Is this, from the outside, it looks like a winnable game for the Wellington Phoenix women, especially how they've been tracking, and with the now inclusion of Anneli Longo, who, as we saw last week, adds a bit of a attacking oomph to the Wellington Phoenix woman with her impressive goal. How are you feeling about the chances of a win here? You're a bit cautious, top of the near top of the table clash for the blokes. Are you feeling a bit more optimistic, a bit more hopeful for the Wellington Phoenix women against Western United?
Yeah, that'd be fair to say. Western United are a tricky team. I think they made the final last year, and they did draw with Melbourne City last week. That was a home game for Western, though. And this is not. So the Phoenix, it's probably a good test because I said last week was the test for them about like, okay, you've won a game. You did really nice to get the victory against Western Sydney. It was. But can you repeat the dose? Because this team had never won back-to-back games in the A-League before. They'd had performances where everything clicked and they won. They'd never repeated it in a row. They haven't yet found that consistency. And then without even playing that well against Brisbane, like I was looking at it afterwards and thinking, well, who would I pick as the standout players? I'm like, well, the keeper, definitely. Bree Edwards, if they had an excellent game, deputising for the injured Riley Foster. But normally when your keeper's your best player, that doesn't suggest that everyone else has played fantastic, right? It's not necessarily the best sign. But they ground out a 2-1 win. And what they did what they needed to do. And that's the kind of gritty, not at their best kind of victory that I don't think this team has been capable of in the past. They've had to play to their best capacity in order to win games. So I don't know. I think if they're as good as they've shown that they have so far, then a home game against a team that hasn't been in spectacular form, although, as I say, they did get a good result last week. So that is a potentially tricky one. The Phoenix obviously lost to Melbourne City in their first game of the season. A home game against a team in a similar spot in the table, a little bit below them as things stand, even though early days table doesn't matter so much yet. I think if they're as good as they've shown so far and as good as they've shown that they can be, we should just be expecting them to get another victory. Like it's hard to say that because of the knock-on effect of 2 years of wooden spoons, but if they are a changed team that's ready to compete for finals, then they should be getting at least a draw out of this game. They should be getting the points on the board from this type of fixture. Lock it down at home. They are going to be playing a few more games at these smaller venues, more of them than they are at Sky Stadium. So you want to make it as much of a fortress as you can, and the more sort of confined atmospheres sometimes are better because the crowd is closer to the field and you don't have that kind of empty, echoey feel of a big stadium with which is only partially full. Yeah, just turn up and do the job. That's the test. It was the test last week, but once you show you can do it, well, the trick is to do it again and again and again and again and again. Yeah, we'll be curious at that point on Longo. Will she start this game? Has she got the minutes in her legs to be a starter? She does start. She won't finish, but was notable when Wisniewski went off injured last week, and it looked like a relatively serious injury. I'm not sure they've have to check what the preview stuff is on about there, whether she's had scans or anything like that, because it was a knee injury, and it was a knee injury that looked like a hyperextension. And in women's football, that generally means ACL tear, which is 9 to 12 months on the sideline. Longo would know about that herself. She's just come back from one. However, it's not always as bad as it seems. So you do have to wait and see what things are like, because there was that incident at the World Cup where Kira Walsh for England seemed to tear an ACL and then was back playing 2 games later. So, we'll see how that goes. But it was Chloe Knott who was summoned on in place of Wisniewski instead of Longo. Longo came on much later in the game, still building up her minutes, right? So that's probably the more likely option. And then Longo plays half an hour or something off the bench, but we'll be interesting to see. She might be good to go. Who knows? Because Chloe Knott actually, I think, finished at like right back or something in that game after Longo came on. So something we haven't seen from her either.
What does Annalie Longo offer the Wellington Phoenix?
Composure on the ball be a major thing. Just someone who is not going to panic, going to make smart decisions, going to be in the right place over and over and over again. Again, it's that consistency thing. It's not just can you do it, it's can you do it every time. Longo's the best at that in this team. She's also a dribbler from midfield, and I love a good dribbler from midfield. It's one thing to be able to control and pass and let the ball do the work, but sometimes there's no easier way to break the line than just touch on the ball and then burst forward and step through the pressure, and then suddenly you're behind and you're just facing up on the defense and you've got options around you, just to be able to change the picture like that. To throw back to one of our previous terms, that's something Longo does very well, and she knows how to spin out of pressure, and just the experience and all that stuff. She's been made the club captain in her first season with them for a reason. It's because she does all this stuff so well. She's played 130 odd games for the Football Ferns, and will be a key player for this team. Like, quality is not dipped. The fitness has got to get back up to where it once was because of the long-term injury, but the quality has not dipped, and she has won A-League titles before in the past. She knows this. It's the one thing I think, because it feels like Longo came in as kind of a direct replacement for Bessie Hassett, who went back to Iceland. But I think Longo in many ways is a slightly better fit, because the team is in a better place around her. So I think Hassett would have been more influential had she been in this team versus last year's team. But also Longo just knows the A-League a little bit better, and is a little bit more of a direct leader in that way. So she will be a very important player for this team. And it's another reason to be excited about what they can do, is that one of their best players has hardly featured. Although when she did feature, she scored a lovely goal. So, there's been an impact already.
Let's quickly finish with a little dose of National League football. I did mention some of the big games. Auckland United hosting Western Springs. And I did see in the men's competition, so we've got Auckland City up against Wellington Olympic, top of the table clash, but you've also got Christchurch United versus Cashmere Technical, which is 3rd versus 4th. You can touch on all 3 games. You can kind of pinpoint one area that you're most interested in, but those are the 3 biggest games in the National League this week. What do you want to say?
Well, there's 2 weeks to go. and the top 4 teams are playing each other, as you highlighted there in the men's competition. So Kashmir Technical can only get to 16 points, and that's below what Wellington Olympics on. So everyone beneath Christchurch United is out of final contention. Obviously, you're all like there's 2 points between 4th and 7th. So and then 2 teams a further 2 points behind them. So it's the old classifications are still very much up for grabs, and it doesn't really mean anything. But you'd rather finish 4th than 8th, right? So there's that. You want to at least finish the season on a nice high, get some good highlights, score some goals. There's a couple. Gavin Coughlin for Kashmir Technical is very much now in. He scored 5 goals in 2 games, so he's right into the Golden Boot race alongside. He has 7 overall alongside Gianni Bazoukas of Wellington Olympic, who scored in 4 consecutive games. Kashmir Technical can't make the final. But if they beat Christchurch United this weekend, it would mean Christchurch United can't make the final, and it would mean Kashmir Technical go ahead of Christchurch United on the ladder on goal difference, because there'd be at least a 2-goal swing, and they're only 1 behind them. It's a pretty big deal when you're the 2 big teams in Christchurch, like the 2 Southern League dominant forces who have been duking it out for multiple seasons. Kashmir Tech weren't quite as good this year. Watched Christchurch United not only win the Southern League, but also go on and win the Chatham Cup. And now they have a chance to give them to ruin their potential for a treble, knock them out of the league. It's a Friday night game as well, so big Southern derby. It's always going to be a big game when these 2 face each other anyway, even if there was nothing on the line. But there is something on the line, and Kashmir Technical can be the ultimate spoilers here in that game. I don't think it's going to matter, because I think Wellington Olympic will just, even if they lose this week to Auckland City, they'll just beat the Phoenix reserves next week and qualify for the final that way. But that means that Auckland City versus Wellington Olympic this weekend is a grand final preview. At least a potential grand final preview, but probably a probable grand final preview. And Wellington Olympic have never beaten Auckland City, but they've been involved in. They've only really been able to play them for a couple of years because they used to be in different formats. But they've been involved in some absolute classics with them recently. The grand final last year was a thriller. I can't remember how it ended. It was 4-2 or 4-3, but Auckland City had to play with 10 men for the second half, and Wellington Olympic tried to come back and didn't quite get there. And there was a game earlier last season, I think, where Auckland United won 2-1 or 1-0, and there was a very controversial goal disallowed for Wellington Olympic, and game they felt they should have got something out of. And then there was the Oceania qualifiers, where at the start of the year for the Champions League, where they played and drew the first leg, I think, and then Wellington Olympic were like 2-0 up midway through the second half of the second leg. I think I've got this right. It was a while ago, so I can't remember exactly. I can probably look it up, but they were seemingly on course to no, they don't have it on Tribe. Seemingly on course to qualify for the Champions League for the first ever time, and then Emiliano Tare comes off the bench and everything completely changes. And Auckland City score a bunch of goals in I think they scored 4 goals in the last 20 minutes or something like that, and just blitzed them at the end. So Wellington Olympic have come close. It is a game. It's the Greeks against the Croatians. So there's that Mediterranean aspect to it as well. It is the Wellington Olympic have set themselves up as the biggest challengers to Auckland City, but they haven't actually been able to beat them yet. Here's an opportunity to A, show what they can do, but also B, scout out against a potential more important game in 2 weeks' time, should they meet again, as is likely in the grand final. That's the men's competition anyway. What'd you say about the women?
Oh, you can just pick whatever. Like, you don't. You got Auckland United versus Western Springs. If you want to say anything about that, otherwise we can wrap it up there. Massive game.
The thing about the women's competition, the men's competition, we sort of know who the finalists are going to be because there's a 4-point gap between second and third. And the women's, you got Eastern Suburbs on 18 points. Then you got Western Springs, Auckland United, Southern United, all on 16 points. Between those teams, they each dealt defeats to Wellington United and Waterside Karori, the 2 Wellington teams, last week. So they're back on 10 points. They were within range themselves. They're now out of it because they'd lost to those top teams. But we got 4 teams competing for 2 places. And Southern United have the worst goal difference of the teams on 16 points. However, their last two games are against Central and Ellerslie, the two bottom teams who don't score a lot of goals and they don't win a lot of games. So they're potentially going to be able to boost that goal difference and get 6 more points, which will take them up to 22. Obviously, Western Springs and Auckland United can't both end on 22 because they're playing each other. That's if they draw, then neither team can get to 22. Then you also got Eastern Suburbs. Who are Eastern Suburbs playing this week? They're playing Ellerslie, so that's a game they should win. And then they got Canterbury away in the last round, which is a tricky one because Eastern Suburbs is the only team who have their fate in their own hands. Because if they win both games, they're through. No one else can catch them because they're already ahead. Whoever loses out of Western Springs and Auckland United this weekend is probably out. And then next week, Springs have Karori and at home, and then Auckland United are away to Wellington United. And both of those are tricky games. Those are good, solid teams. Those are the two central football sides, capital football sides rather. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. If I had to bet, I would say I think Southern and Eastern Suburbs are going to be in the final. But I mean, that it pretty much sets up Western Springs and Auckland United this weekend as an effective, unofficial quarterfinal for the thing. So the men's comp, we kind of know what's going on. It's all about these two teams getting a few siders in a little test run against each other, Wellington Olympic and Auckland City. Women, there's 4 teams still in completely realistic possibilities of making the grand final, and it's just whichever of those teams is going to be able to go out there and win their last 2 games, because that's what it's going to take, is to win each of these last 2 games. Yeah, we'll see how that goes, but that just means that there's at least 3 games with massive implications on this weekend. Big deal times, This is when we get to really shuffle the deck and figure out where things stand.
That is
Shuffle the
niche
deck's probably
card.
not a good metaphor. I think we're looking for like turn cards or whatever. The river and the turn and poker, I think, is the one, right? Last two cards to see who completes their hand.
Oh, I
I
don't
haven't played
know.
poker for a while, so
I'm just trying to end the podcast. That is the niche
yeah, let's
cast
do that.
for this Thursday. Big up yourself. We'll be doing our subscriber podcast tomorrow. So if you are a member of the Patreon whānau or you do have a paid Substack subscription, check that out. Otherwise, big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.